Well, a very good evening to everybody here. I'm Tarun Khurana from Khurana & Khurana and from IIPRD. I thank everybody for joining in today. It's a very exciting topic that we are doing a webinar on after several months. As a matter of fact, we were very frequent a few months back, but for the last 2 or 3 months, we've not been doing one. But I couldn't resist doing a webinar with Jack on this particular topic, given the subject matter that this is, and where we see patent drafting and prosecution growing towards utilization of artificial intelligence and tools that automate a big chunk of the prosecution that we do in our daily lives. So I think without further ado and elaborate introductions, I would leave it to Jack, who's become a dear friend over the last few weeks or months, I would say, when I had met him personally in the US. And we've been working together. I am a user, and we as a firm are a user of the tool as well. And therefore, I thought it's a good platform for him to be able to demonstrate out what the offering here is, what the solution is, and how patent drafting the years to come would be anticipated to be automated in one way or the other. And therefore, thank you, Jack, for joining in. I think it's really early for you in the morning. So thank you for taking out your time. I would request everybody to join in so that we can have a discussion coming early. And well, Jack, thank you very much for joining in again. I think I leave it to you. Why don't you give a very quick background, and then perhaps I think everybody is eager to listen to and hear about what PatentPal is all about and how it works and the key aspects thereof.
Hey, Tarun, absolutely. Thanks so much for putting together this webinar. It's been an absolute pleasure working with you. I'm really glad we met here in the US. And I'm super excited to show everyone what is now possible with patent AI. I think the most common reaction we get is that people are not aware that this is now possible, that patent NLP is actually here today. It is no longer upcoming technology, but it's ready for people to use, and it's being used heavily here in the US and starting to more and more being used overseas as well. So a little bit about my background. So I studied machine learning in undergrad and went to law school and did got my degree in IP in patent law, and then started in patent litigation, and then worked in patent prosecution before starting building PatentPal over the last 3 years. And so this has been a product of a lot of research and development, and we launched the product at the beginning of this year. And already just over the last month, the first patent that was drafted with PatentPal was approved and issued by the US Patent Office. So this is essentially patent history that is happening just now as we speak. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and dive into the demo. So the way you would use the tool is you come to the website, patentpal.com, you log in, you create an account with us, and you get access to a user interface like this. So I'll just go ahead and ask Tarun to mute any of the guests so that we don't have any background noise as well, just as a courtesy to the guests here. Yeah, so to get started, you would either drag and drop a Word document to upload your claims, or you can click on this upload document button, or simply click on blank document. So the idea with using this tool is you start by putting in patent claims. So here is one of the pre-built examples from a published patent application with 33 claims written by an attorney. And then you just press this red button off to the right. And it does so, it tries to understand it from a computational perspective. And so what I mentioned is essentially a knowledge graph. It's an arrangement of concepts. And so this software tries to extract out all of the concepts in the claims, all of the relationships, and it tries to build a knowledge graph. And once it has this kind of data structure, knowledge graph data structure, it then generates a set of figures and description language that I used to write manually in my own practice. And so the first question is essentially like, what is this generating? So it generates the abstract section, it generates the brief summary, it generates method flowcharts for any method claims. And then for any claim sets, any claim families that don't have a time dimension, that's not a method, right? So we think about the universe of all inventions of either having a time dimension, so is a method or process containing a series of steps or events, or is a state of the world. It's something that exists. It has, it could be an abstract software system, or it can have a physical embodiment like an apparatus or chair. It could be a protein or composition of matter. It doesn't matter. Something that exists. For anything that's what we call a system, we generate an abstract conceptual block diagram like this. And then we generate the brief description of the figures, and then we generate the detailed description of all of these figures. So altogether, what this is achieving is providing, in the US, Section 112 written disclosure support for your claims, or what we call claim support. And so the brief summary provides a literal narrow support for each individual claim element. And then the detailed description provides support for this arrangement of claim elements that the claims are reciting. Without 112 support, what ends up happening is you get a 112 rejection when you actually prosecute this patent, which is very difficult to overcome sometimes, because you cannot add new subject matter after you file the patent application, or you have to have an awkward conversation with the examiner explaining why they're wrong, and why, in fact, like this element, like a drive unit assembly, is in fact supporting the specification, even though it's not literally recited, it's recited by equivalence, right? So it's just something you want to avoid. Like, it creates a lot of unnecessary delays in prosecution. And so as a matter of practice, we will write this kind of language manually, both in the brief summary and in parts of the detailed description. And all of this language is now generated with a single click of a button. Altogether, based on customer feedback, this automates about 4 to 6 hours on every non-provisional full utility patent application with a full set of claims. Okay, so I'll go through a simple example of how this app works. And I think that's often helpful to just see what the tool is doing kind of under the hood. So if you give it a very simple claim like a computer, is going to generate a block, render that visualization, and then it's going to say in the detailed description, like figure 1, it's a block diagram that describes a computer according to embodiments of the present disclosure. And then what we recommend users do is to build their claim one element at a time and iterate on top. So you can say a computer comprising a processor, a memory device, wherein the device includes a module, for example, right? So a simple claim like that. So as you can see, this is kind of like, to use a software analogy, this is like a compiler for your claims. It treats your claims as kind of like a pseudo programming language and gives you a visualization. It tells you how the software has interpreted your claims. And it handles imperfect inputs very robustly and very well, right? So I didn't put in the semicolons into the claim, even though we recommend that, we recommend putting in the claim numbers, for example. It recognizes that this concept of the device refers to the memory device, even though it's not a perfect literal match. So if you were to give it something like a first memory device and a second memory device, by default, it will recognize this refers to the most recent concept. And then if you give it the proper antecedent basis, which we recommend, the full global match, it will identify that concept as well. And in the detailed description, it will say the first memory device may include a module, right? So the way we assemble the detailed description, it requires a deep understanding of linguistics. It needs to understand sentence structure. It needs to understand what is the subject, the object, and it needs to understand verb tense, because we write everything in non-limiting prose. So we add in this kind of non-limiting phrases, and then we change the verb tense from what's declarative into permissive tense, right? May include. I'll show another example. So if you say like a method comprising, say like receiving data, analyzing data, right? Let's make that claim too. It's going to generate a flow chart if you have like something like a home desktop setup. So I'm just going to describe like my desk here. Computer system comprising a monitor, a computer, a mouse, a keyboard, right? So this is kind of like the setup on my desk. It'll by default generate a block diagram like this. But what's interesting to know is like we also support illustrations, right? So we have this diagram, we generated these reference numbers, we generated this language to describe the diagram. If you right click on the figure, you can also upload an illustration. So for example, your inventor may have given you a drawing like this, or you may have someone put together a drawing, and you can simply then just label the drawing with the same reference numbers that we generated previously. So that's the monitor, that's the computer, the keyboard, and the mouse, right? And then once you're happy with all of your drawings, you're happy with what we generated, you can then simply download everything into Word, Visio, and PowerPoint for the figures. So in your specification is going to be in Word with all of the paragraph numbers that are already put in. So if you want to make any modifications to this, this is now your draft for you to use however you like. You can take some of this language we generate and put it into your own template, or you can use this as your starting template and add in your boilerplate language and other descriptions into this initial draft. Same thing with the figures. So if you have all of your diagrams in here, including any illustrations you've added, and you can make any further edits as you like, as you normally would. And then another thing I like to show people is like you can make the change with one action. So if you need to update the figure numbers, so like if you have figures, say 1 to 4, and you want this to be figure 5, you can simply just make that change, and all of the reference numbers are going to be updated instantly with one action. So let's say we want this to be figures 5, 6, and 7. We can make that change very easily. And then once you download it into your figure editor, you can simply put in your figures 1 to 4 in front of whatever you have here. The last feature I will show is phrase customization. So what we have here is a set of default phrases, but actually all of this is customizable. So right now, if you want to change the phrases we use in the brief summary, you can change, say, like create a new profile. Let's say you have a client called Microsoft, right? And maybe your client prefer language like implementations instead of embodiments, or can also include, etc. So you can make that change instantly and see that updated in the generated language in real time, and have this profile ready to go pre-configured so that I can simply just use this next time. So yeah, altogether, this is quite a bit of mechanical writing that now has been automated. In terms of next steps for us, we're looking to generate the background section of a patent as well. And we're also looking to add in definitions and descriptions of technical concepts. So currently, the software doesn't add any new subject matter. So to the extent that your claims are not fully enabling the specification we generate would not be as well. What it does do is providing that kind of literal support around both the claim elements and also this arrangement of claim elements. Cool. Yeah, with that, I'll turn it over to Tarun with questions, and then we'll also take some questions from the audience afterwards as well.
Yeah, so Jack, could you also explain from a subject matter standpoint, what kind of subject matters is this perhaps best suited for? I mean, I obviously see that most of the examples that you've given are from the high technology domain, but how is your experience around, and how is the experience been of attorneys in the US that you've worked with for non-high technology matters, engineering related patent applications and stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. So this software is technology sector agnostic. What I mean by that is that, this is not a set of templates that we built for a specific technology sector, right? So, given that there are some similar tools out there, I believe for software patents, oftentimes we do get a question asking like, is our software only good for software sector patents? So the answer is it works with any technology sector as long as the input is in natural language. So the kinds of claim input it won't work as well with would be something that has a lot of symbols, or like if it has a ton of gene sequences, or if it has equations built in, right? Like those kind of things can throw it off. Like we run some tests as well, and what we found is like surprisingly it performs quite well even in those cases. It's able to extract out concepts property, it's able to still build a good block diagram and flow charts and write the language, right? But there are higher chance that it may produce inaccuracies when there are symbols like that. But what we found is that this software works pretty well in general on software patents, on mechanical patents, on electrical patents, and also even on biosciences, like if it has natural language claims, like what is a protein and comprising sub-elements and so on.
All right. And what about dependent claims versus independent? I mean, how does the software differentiate and analyze them from a specification standpoint in terms of perhaps either making the figures differently or putting them across in the specification? How would that get impacted differently from how independent claims get analyzed by the software at this moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the question is like, how do we handle dependent claims? So the way I'm going to write a dependent claim here. So this computer of claim 1 further comprising, say, a first device and a second device. And so the way the software thinks about the claim structure is that the first independent claim is describing the most basic first embodiment of an invention. And so what it's going to do is generate a figure 1 for the first claim. And then for any dependent claim or dependent claim chains, right, which means like a chain of dependent claims that are dependent on each other. So let's say 2 depends on 1, and then we can have like a claim 3 dependent on 2, right? For any chain that introduces at least 2 new elements, it's going to generate an additional figure as well. It's not going to generate an additional figure if there's only 1 new element. So I'll show that here. So let's say the computer of claim 1 further comprising a second device. So because I've split up these 2 elements into 2 separate dependent claim chains, and these are separate chains because 2 depends on 1, 3 depends on 1. And so both only introduce 1 new element, and we consider that to be too trivial to generate a new figure altogether. So all of that is still in the detailed description. It's still describing second device, for example, and first device. So you still have that claim support there. We just won't generate a figure for it. If you want to generate a figure having both first and second devices elements, then you simply have to chain them together, right? So 3 depends on 2, and then 2 depends on 1, and that forms a chain. And then that will get you a figure because it's introducing at least 2 new elements, right? So, so that's important to understand, because ultimately this is a tool that is in the drafter's hands to use. So it's up to the drafter to tell the software what kind of figures they want the software to generate.
Right. And from a figure perspective, I think all the examples that you've seen, that you've shown till now, are largely, say, module or system oriented figures. I mean, are there architecture level, system architecture or computing architecture level drawings that can also be generated? For example, if there was a system which had a first computing device which was communicatively coupled to a second communicating device, and then both being coupled to a server, would they be then shown in more like a network architecture standpoint?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So we can provide an illustration like that, right? So you can have like a system comprising, a first, computer, and but it's just going to generate a block diagram, like a first computer, a second computer, wherein the first computer is connected to the second computer, right? So what it's going to generate is a block diagram like this. So if you want an image of a server or an image of a computer, right, that's something you can add afterwards in the PowerPoint itself, in the PowerPoint or Visio documents itself. but the language is going to be there, right? So it's going to say, to the extent that you said like first and second computer are connected, it's going to recite that in a detailed description in non-limiting prose.
And if you were to say like the first computer is connected to the second computer through a network or through through the internet, for instance, it won't really still treat them differently, right?
Yeah, currently it doesn't. So the software doesn't know like what a network is or what an internet is or what a server is. It just knows that those things are concepts, and it knows the structure of those concepts in the sense that it knows the system comprises, these elements and that these elements are connected. So it's going to recite these things in the specification. In the future, we're going to add lines connecting, these elements based on what you describe as connections as well. But right now we recommend users simply drawing the lines afterwards in the document. But yeah, currently we don't generate any illustrations of servers or any kind of semantic understanding at the moment.
And when you download these drawings as a presentation or a PPT, are they editable or are they downloaded as figures as part of the PPT?
Oh yeah, they're fully editable. I'm using a Macintosh computer, so yeah, you can move these elements, you can add new elements. This is now completely for a document that's the starting point for your draft now. We actually do a really great job with making sure the diagram is super clean. So PowerPoint doesn't have a grid system. Visio, if you use Visio does have a grid system. So we make sure all of these elements we generate are perfectly grid aligned, so it will be easy for you to manipulate afterwards.
And if you go back to the spec again, and the generated spec is it editable at this very moment? I mean, not here, but at the tool itself, if you were to edit it on the web platform itself, is it editable, and would it reflect back in some way on the drawings or on the claims? I remember you telling us that it doesn't, but is there a way that perhaps we can make changes to the spec on the web platform and then it gets reflected? For example, for reference numbers, if the second computer is 120, if we were to make it 122, would it sort of change the drawing, or we would have to do it manually?
Yeah, so that would need to be done manually. We have some basic renumbering features, like we can renumber figure labels essentially. So you can change all of this to figure 2, but we currently don't have element renumbering. So that's something you will need to do manually if you want this to be, say, like you said, 222. So you can, whatever you see here is essentially a preview of what you export. So you can make some of the changes here. We don't currently allow for editing in the figure itself, but once you make the changes, you can download it into these files. And then you can also make the changes into the file itself after you download it.
And how do you envisage, Jack, if you could also maybe throw some light, because I think a few of the attendees are also individual inventors and perhaps intending to use the tool where they themselves are able to generate the specification without having to go to even an attorney for that matter. So from that perspective, is there a way that they could probably write a rough claim on the left-hand side and still get a decent spec that they can rely upon?
Yeah, so we do have inventors who are on the platform and using this to write claims. Some inventors really enjoy doing that. Some inventors really enjoy learning about claim drafting, and they would actually read several books on it and figure out how to write claims on their own. And so that works for them. The spec is accurate if the claims are well written. But it's, even under our terms of use, we tell inventors, right, like this at the end of the day is not a replacement for attorney. This tool is not meant to give you, legal advice. The inventors have found this tool helpful for learning how to write good claims. But at the end of the day, it's up to the user to know, to review the generated outputs and to make sure that they are accurate for their purposes, right? So, it's a good tool, but it's with some disclaimers. What we recommend, so we actually have another program that we're running. We're marketing a legal product called P3 PatentPal Provisional. Right now, we're running several pilots of it. And so we actually match inventors with attorneys on our network. right? So if there's an inventor, for example, in India looking to file a patent in India, we would match the inventor with one of our attorneys that are part of our customer network in India, who can then use this tool and work with the inventor to help them draft the patent and get it on filed. What's great about this program is because of the efficiency gains from using our technology, and let's say for a provisional patent application, what is traditionally a 6-hour product, a 6-hour attorney product, can now be completed in 3 hours, because PatentPal now generates all of that claim support with a single click, right? So that would, within the scope of provisional, that typically is about 3 hours worth of mechanical writing. And that frees up the lawyer to focus on the parts of the patent that matter, including writing a good set of claims, even for a provisional filing, right? So for a base tier product, it's a 3-hour attorney time of reviewing the inventor's disclosure, writing a set of claims, generating the PatentPal's claim support language with one click, and then reviewing that. So at the end of the day, this allows the inventor to get their patents filed more quickly, and also to get a higher quality legal product from an attorney, from a high caliber patent attorney that they wouldn't otherwise be able to access the same kind of budget.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I would like to open up the platform. I would request anybody who may have questions around the tool, and also in general about automation of patent preparation exercises. Please feel free to ask.
Hello, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening. This is Sudhir here from FDC. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
Okay. This was very interesting session regarding software for drafting of patents. Traditionally, drafting of patent has been an art to write the language and to hide so many things. You have to read in between the lines. How do you think that all these subtle things will be taken care by the software? Will it have the same flavor as we used to have manually?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Thanks for the question, Sudhir. So you're asking I think you're asking kind of more of a future-facing question, like what the technology is capable of doing with this kind of AI.
Exactly, yeah, because this could be the beginning of going for a software, but it may become more complex in future.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as you've seen, the current technology doesn't add any new subject matter. It doesn't add any flavors. It's very much providing claim support. And then I'll talk about what I think is coming next, and then I'll talk about what is ultimately possible, further into the future. I think so right now it's generating narrow literal claim support, and that's a good amount of mechanical writing. It's a pretty significant endeavor in any patent application, especially in provisional. So for us, we see based on working with the attorneys that we have now, it automates about 50% of a provisional filing. It automates about 20 to 30% of a non-provisional patent application, right? And that's pretty significant. The next step for us includes generating the background. So we're able to use, published patent application, published patent data to build a large language model and really understand a lot of the context, the technological context about all of these technologies and these technological concepts. And we're able to generate prior art descriptions, right? So things like in the background section, and also some sections in the detailed description as well. And that includes also like definitions of concepts, right? So like if you give it like what a computer network is, or what a computer is in this simple example here, it'll give you some description of that, right? So that's very, very achievable. And then what's left to the drafter is focusing on describing the key embodiments and the alternate embodiments. And then further into the future, right, with large language models like transformers we have today, like they're quite powerful. So they are, just so that everyone has context, like the transformers have been like a revolutionary leap in terms of language technology that's only developed in the past 3 years. And what transformers do is they're trained to predict what the next word is. They're really large language model trained on a ton of text data. For us, we use transformers that were trained on general language corpuses, and then they're fine-tuned on pattern data. But what the transformers can do is, like, because they're trying to predict what the next word is, and they're trained on a lot of data, they get very good at doing that, and they start to develop a model of the world even, right? They understand, they start to have some contextual understanding of what all these technical concepts mean. And so these kind of large language models are really fantastic for starting to do all sorts of language tasks, including like auto completion, including question answering, including summarization, right? So I can very much see transformers starting to assist even with some of the core pattern drafting aspects, right? I don't see it as ever replacing the drafter, but being able to get you a good initial draft, right? Or giving you suggestions if you ever get into writer's block, those will be. Yeah, great question. Thanks for that.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Can I ask one question?
Yeah, please go ahead.
My question is regarding the chemical compound or any drug molecule. If you want to frame a claim for that or the description as shown here for this system, can we use this software for chemical compounds?
Yeah, as long as it's written in somewhat natural language. If there is a chemical formula, if it's fairly tame, I think that's okay. So like a chemical compound, comprising, a first formula, and a second formula, right? So something simple like that. So that's all fine. It can parse that, no problem. But as soon as you add in, if you wanted to understand any kind of syntax inside the chemical formula itself, it's not going to do that. But if you just give it like a symbol, like B30 or something, I don't think that's a valid formula. So it knows to pick that up and knows to add that into the detailed description. It's not going to throw it off too much, as long as like the claim is not too formula heavy.
Okay, so chemical formula, I think in case of the structural formula, it will not draw itself.
Right, it's not, we don't currently draw any chemical formulas. Yeah, that would be like a very specific technical module we can add in the future. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
It's very interesting.
Thanks, Indra. Yeah.
So what I understand, this software, will it be like help in grammar? Like there are some softwares which help you in correcting your English language. Will it be in that kind of category where it will help you to put the things grammatically right, or it will speak some language of patent while doing the drafting? What kind of assistance, what kind of help it will render to the drafter?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how does this software help you draft? Say, how does it help you draft claims? So we currently don't have any proofreading features directly. We don't have any kind of features that currently look at the claims you're writing and then give you feedback on it. That's something we'll be adding into the future. What we have found is that users do develop better and better claim drafting practices through using the software. And they do that by looking at the feedback that the software gives them. I'll run through one example like that. So if you have like a computer comprising a processor connected to a memory, right? So this looks like a very innocent claim, very simple claim. And then you try to render that, and then often users are puzzled by why the memory isn't there in the block diagram, right? That didn't create a block for it, even though it is described in a detailed description. And the reason for that is because the memory is never explicitly said to be comprised within the computer, right? So this is kind of we call this like an implicit branching. You know, the comprising relationship is not explicitly recited, but rather it's kind of maybe implied, right? So if you replace memory with something like an external server, right? So based on, you know, our intuitive understanding of the world, we know that external servers are typically located remotely from our local computer. And so this kind of block diagram would be the correct interpretation of that claim. And so basically the take-home message is that this software doesn't try to, it would render the broadest interpretation of your claims. It won't try to assume any structure that you haven't recited. So if you want to put the memory in there, you would write something like this: a processor, you know, and a memory connected to the processor, right? So that makes the comprising relationship explicit. And then you're going to see the memory block being rendered. Or you can say like a processor and a memory wherein the processor is connected to the memory, right? If you want the relationship to be in kind of this forward direction for processor to memory, that's fine as well. So at the end of the day, like a claim is actually not merely a full English sentence. You know, your indentations do matter. The structure of how you write the claim as an outline very much matters. So this tool actually is a very instructive tool to help, you know, inventors, to help law students, to help junior practitioners learn good claim drafting practices.
Jack, there are a couple of questions on the chat box as well. You might want to sort of either read them or I can read it out for you.
Okay, perfect. I can start taking a look.
There's one question from Ram Bala.
Okay, so using this tool, given two specifications drafted using the tool as inputs, can the tool identify infringement white space to operate? Yeah, no, that's a fantastic question. The technology is certainly there to be able to do that. That's not a feature we currently offer. But you know, essentially what we have built is the knowledge graph, invention graph technology. So in the future, that's certainly possible. We will be able to compare two claim sets and two specifications at the graph level, and not only understand their differences in terms of like keyword or text differences, but actually understand the differences in the concepts and the arrangement of concepts, right? In actual comparison from invention to invention. So that it's possible with our technology. It's just not a feature we currently offer yet. Yeah. Great question. Vijayan asked, do you have features for windmill and mechanical devices? Absolutely, yeah. So mechanical is one of those spaces that work really well with this tool. It's not going to render and illustrate. It's not going to generate an illustration that shows the spatial arrangement of those elements in your mechanical device. But again, it very much supports illustrations. So you can upload your image in there and it will work with that using the language we generate. So yeah, so mechanical device is one of those sectors that work really well. Adit Sharma, thanks Adit. So does the software provide mechanical, pictorial, or orthographic drawings as well as just block and float? So yeah, great question. So it currently provides flow charts and block diagrams, right? So I showed many examples of block diagrams, right? So here's an example of a flow chart as well. The way it does this, it looks at what the root concept is. So if it identifies the root concept as a method or a process, it's going to generate a flow chart like this. Make sure you uncheck truncate overflow text, otherwise you'll see these kind of dots. So that's something to look out for in the customization menu. It can generate with verbal steps or non-verbals like illustrative steps. So this would be like a simpler flow chart. All of the full language is in the detailed description as well. So these are some flowchart things. But yeah, as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't generate any drawings. It does support your drawings, but primarily it's generating specification language that are compatible with your drawings. So Anurag asked a great question. We are looking to build a patent portfolio of our own. We currently are keeping all of this as trade secrets. But yeah, in the software context, trade secrets are difficult to enforce this patent, given that it's all very internal workings, it's hard to identify infringement scenarios. So that's why we're currently keeping that trade secret, but we will be building our own patent portfolio using this tool. Certainly, we have PatentPal patents that have already been published and approved by the patent office. So this is a tool that's very powerful to quickly build out a portfolio as well. Yeah. So Manish asked, can one choose to draft exclusively for specific jurisdiction? Would the feedback from the tool vary for different jurisdictions? So it works for the US, it works for Europe. As far as I know, like we have users using it for both of those jurisdictions. There may be some adaptations in the workflow that needs to be put in to make it work better for Europe, for example. Like with the US, there's no workflow adaptation needed. Things like in Europe, I know that oftentimes there's like element numbers written in the claim itself. So that those will most likely need to be removed or like left out when using this tool, and then add in those element numbers later afterwards when with the combination of the generated outputs. So like it's minor workflow changes like that, right? So if you put in the claims with element numbers, the chances are it will throw off the tool. Yeah. In terms of quality of specification auto drafted using this tool, where you place its ranking at a high level? Okay, yeah, that's a great question. So I'll answer it in a few ways, right? So the one way of understanding the quality of what we generate is relative to the other tools out there, right? In terms of what software is capable of, right? Where do we rank in quality, right? Another way of answering the question is, how does the quality of our language compare to that written manually by a lawyer? But I think that's actually a less important question than the third way of answering the question, which is like, how does this improve the quality of patent when it's being used by a lawyer, right? So the first answer is like, compared to any of the language, the content generation tools out there, PatentPal is far and above the best software tool for generating patent language, right? There's just no competition. We generate the most amount of mechanical writing than any other tool, and we generate at a much higher quality than any other tool, right? Anyone who's ever used our tool like absolutely understands that. Even in the brief summary, for example, I've seen other tools where they've essentially copy pasted over the claim with very little edits. Sometimes they keep the semicolon, sometimes they just add in a sentence at the very beginning. This is not the preferred style for writing the brief summary. We very much prefer writing it in full prose, breaking it apart and writing it out sentence by sentence so that it reads more like English prose, and add in non-limiting phrases so that it makes sure that nothing is limiting the scope of your IP. So we do all of that really, really cleanly, really well. How does this compare to like another human? Right, it's not gonna be poetry, right? Like the language we generate is quite mechanical. It is at the end of the day mechanical writing. There's gonna be perhaps like less phrase variations than what a human might write, right? Even though you can introduce some phrase variety in your customizations. But the sentence structure is very predictable, and actually we think that's a good thing, right? The more you use this tool, the more it becomes very predictable to you. This becomes a good tool in your hands, and you know how to use it, right? So you can use it at the beginning of your workflow. You put in a set of claims, you generate an initial draft, and get you that 4 to 6 hours of time saving right off the bat. Or you can use this in a modular way, right? Just before you file your patent, you put your claims, which may have been edited and have more new versions. You put your claims at the very end, and you generate all of this claim support language with one click, and then you include that in your filings in a modular way, right? So we think predictability is actually good as a software tool, and it's up to the drafter to add in their own customizations, which leads into my third answer, which is like, how does this improve the quality of the draft when it's being used by a human? Which is, it absolutely improves the quality of your patent on every single time, in every single budget scenario, right? So, if you have only a small amount of time, this tool is fantastic because it lets you file a better quality provisional, even when you have very little time to write one. If you have a lot of time, this tool frees you up from writing the mechanical language so you can focus on the parts of the patent that really matters, the key embodiments, the alternate embodiments, framing the narrative, writing the claims. And so it's really about improving the quality of the churning hour. So the value of the tool is less about what the tool is doing, it's more about what it allows a human to do even more of with the use of this tool. I see a lot of new questions. Okay, so Manish asked, can one design an internal library of boilerplates for specific niche subject matters? Would it be possible to internalize certain sets of boilerplates in the workflow? Absolutely. This is not something the tool directly supports at the moment. So it's not too hard for our users to build a boilerplate library just in their own file system in Word documents and copy and paste those over. Of course, in the future, we'll add support for that directly so that you can customize your boilerplate language and build your own library inside the app itself, so that this will all be a native experience and you wouldn't have to rely on external files. But right now, what we recommend users do is to copy and paste their boilerplate templates from their existing file system. Anurag asked, does the tool have intelligence to suggest a synonym or right word fit for any word or phrase we put in? Not currently. So that's a feature. That's a great feature suggestion, and that's something we'll add in the future. Arvin, can the software prepare descriptions for alternate embodiments? I read that a tool called Cloam generates variants of input claims. I suppose a more streamlined method to create such variant could be used for disclosing alternate embodiments or combination of components mentioned in the claims. Yeah, no, great points. I think it's a similar point to the synonym example as well. So whether the tool can suggest synonyms for technical concepts, whether it can suggest like alternate configurations of the same claim elements, all of these things are very doable. I haven't checked out the tool you mentioned, Arvin. I will definitely check that out. I'm not currently aware of any tool yet that can do that reliably and at high quality, but maybe I'm just not aware of a tool that exists. But that's something, those are definitely features we're looking to add in the future. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for all of these questions. Yeah, they're really great questions. And the input would be claims. Yeah. So claims to draft. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are recording the session anyways, just in case anybody is not able to join from the beginning, we can always share. We can take one last question if somebody has. We have time till 6 o'clock that we have taken from Jack.
You can. So that's a great question in person. Can you input claims by speaking? We don't support that directly. That's a good request. I know a lot of people like to use dictation, but what it's doable. There are certainly many great dictation software that goes from audio to text that are out there. We recommend, say, like Dragon Dictation. Otter AI does a great job with note taking and transcription. So I recommend using one of those tools and putting in the text into the claims. Most likely you will need to do some data cleaning. I believe even with the best transcription softwares, they're not going to be perfect. Yeah. How to access the software? What is the costing structure? So the software is available on patentpal.com. The costing structure is based on draft volume. So it's different depending on if you are an individual or if you're a firm, but the same concept applies. At the end of the day, it's a price that's based on the volume of drafting. And we convert that into a time-based subscription, either a monthly or yearly subscription, depending on how much usage you're looking to get out of the tool. So, I mean, the way to think about pricing is like, for a law firm, for example, or for any legal team, the thinking is that like it's essentially, like hiring an associate to help you with the mechanical writing in all of your drafts, and hiring an associate to improve like the quality of your entire drafting team and also the productivity of your whole team. Can you reverse thesaurus solutions using GPT-3 BERT be used for providing definition? Yeah, so yeah, transformer models like GPT-3 would be a very good application for generating definitions of technical concepts. Yeah, NRI, yeah, that's correct. So you can upload. So I'll just go through some of these. You can upload a patent like this using the main menu, or you can just like drag and drop one of these into the browser. So I'll let this finish processing. So it's going to upload the patent into the claims panel. What we care about is just the set of claims right now. So it's not going to consider any of the remainder of the draft. It's only going to use the claims to generate an initial draft, which you can then take the generated language and merge that into your existing document. And then the other way of uploading a document is just to take this and drag and drop it into the browser. So I understand it's time-based. If so, how much it will be on average consider. So it depends on every attorney. It depends on every firm. So for a solo practice, we're looking at typically $500 a month in the U.S. So with Tarun and I will also be working with you to figure out a costing structure that works for you. So definitely reach out to us after this call. Yeah.
Perfect. I think this is great, Jack. We've had a great, set of information in the last 50 odd minutes. It is absolutely power packed in totality. Thanks for having us again that early in the morning for yourself. And thank you very much. I believe that people will have more questions in time to come, and perhaps when they take a trial and test the product and experience it by themselves, they might have inputs and questions. And there's just there's a long way to go, I'm sure, for the software, and there's a lot of AI to be included and incorporated, and so much more intelligence that can come in with time to come. But again, this is how old is the software? When did you launch it, Jack? If you can tell, so that people can just have a context of it.
Yeah, and this ties into Mitesh's question pretty well too. Yeah, so we launched so it was 3 years of research and development. We launched a product at the beginning of this year. So the first PatentPal patent that has been approved and issued by the patent office was issued last month. It was a COVID-19 patent that was filed at the beginning of the year, and because it was on track 1, it only took 9 months to approve it. So right now it's still relatively a new product, but it's very much working. It's in high quality. We have major firms that are working with us. We have in-house teams that are working with us. We also work with a lot of solo practice and boutique practices, and we also work with inventors, right? So it's been in pretty wide distribution, just even within the past few months. Yeah.
All right, perfect. So I think Mitesh, this question was answered previously by Jack as well, that at this particular moment it is supporting only NLPs, which is natural language based claims. Anything to do with a chemical structure or a Marcuse claim of that nature won't be recognized and appropriately translated into a patent specification at this moment. Same goes for mathematical equations. Same goes for anything which is beyond natural text at this very moment. But again, you can write whatever is in the natural text, take whatever specification gets generated out of it, and add whatever meat and experimental data and additional information and embodiments that you might want to paste through that. Perfect, Jack. Thank you so very much for your time, and I look forward, and I thank everybody to join in as well and taking out their time. We will upload this in a few days, and thank you very, very much everybody for joining in, and Jack for speaking.
Thank you so much, Tarun. Really appreciate you putting this together. Thanks everyone. It was great presenting this with the whole audience here.
Perfect. Thank you, Jack. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Good night. Yeah.